Hello.
What are you doing here?
Well, I think I'm supposed to be here. Somebody told me to show up, so I'm showing up.
Hey, all right. Well, it's always good to see you. Hey, I've got some great news for you. Since the last episode, I have now joined the double vaccinated club. So
Hey.
I am looking forward to seeing you live in San Francisco sooner than later.
Well, we actually risked a live encounter because we did the show together, but we were appropriately masked and socially distanced. So now we can throw caution to the winds.
We could throw caution to the wind, and I actually really enjoyed that evening. And for those who are tuning in, welcome to Intersections. John and I are just reminiscing over our live encounter maybe a month or so ago, where we were in his newly opened San Francisco studio, overlooking the San Francisco Giants, almost at San Jose, dude, because of our first guest. But we have been discussing plans for bringing live versions of Intersections and special Intersections inspired salons for live engagement once we're all vaccinated and safe. But with that, let's welcome everybody officially to the show. Welcome to Intersections. This is our live weekly conversation where John and I get together with some of the most amazing people you have not yet met. Certainly folks you have heard from or heard about. And every single week, it's like going to school and also going to a TED Talk. It just inspired. I learn, I unlearn every week. So before I officially give you the spiel, thank you for tuning in. Please do share with us where you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you. Please share with us your questions and also your comments. We will share. We'll share your comments and feedback on the screen in real time, and we'll also do our best to get to your questions in the process. So with that said, Intersections every single Thursday at 10:30 Pacific is our weekly conversational jam session that dives deep into the intersections among technology, innovation, culture, and ideas. We bring diverse personalities and worldviews together in service of greater understanding and unlearning. My co-host and co-founder, John Kao, The Economist has called him Mr. Creativity. He's just an all-around amazing person, someone who has been pushing the boundaries of innovation and possibility for many years. He has also he's not just a thought leader, and he's not just an advisor in the field of innovation. You know, he's taught at Harvard Business School. He's served as visiting faculty at the MIT Media Lab in Stanford. I've met at least one of his students, and he has been inspiring future innovators and future entrepreneurs and future doers for a long time now. So the impact that he's had, not just in the companies that he's worked with, but also through his students and the companies that they build and the companies that they work with, his impact has been grand. He's also a Tony nominated producer, film and stage, because he had free time, and he wrote the best-selling Jam in the Art and Discipline of Business Creativity. And also, John is a prolific artist in many ways, and I hope, in addition to authoring our intro and outro music, he's just a brilliant musician, and I look forward for you to see him one day jam for us live. Mr. Kao, welcome to Intersections.
Hey, Brian, thanks for that really generous introduction. You know, I'd like to meet that guy someday. That sounds pretty interesting. And thanks for mentioning students. You know, I think one of the things I'll always be most proud of is that during my time at Harvard Business School, I had 3,000 students. And virtually everyone who went into creative industries or venture capital or high tech from, let's say, 84 to 96, I got to touch in one way or another. Now they're kind of out there doing amazing stuff. So let me reciprocate. My missing half in the innovation field, Brian Solis, was digital before digital was a thing, you know. So obviously we have been witnessing the stitching together of digital with innovation, digital with marketing, digital with social media, and with the whole notion of community in a digital light. And Brian has been at the forefront of all of those topics, and more importantly, how they relate to the way we need to organize our businesses, the way we need to organize our lives. He's been a thought leader of many parts, an author, a keynote speaker in great demand, and an influencer of many influencers. I've come to understand, because we have very complementary networks in terms of people who are out there on various frontier aspects of building the 21st century. So I couldn't be happier to have Brian as a partner in this enterprise. And oh, by the way, he has a day job as well in his. I won't call it his free time, because that is supposed to be his main area of focus, which is as global evangelist of innovation for Salesforce. So, Brian, here we are.
Here we are. Thank you, John. Always a pleasure to see you and learn from you. And I think we should probably just kick things off, because our first guest is already backstage. He's a longtime friend and someone whose work I've admired for a long time. And then he went and became the president of Sharks Sports and Entertainment, of which you might know one of the organizations as the San Jose Sharks. Jonathan has been a long time innovator. He was CMO and CDO of SAP before that. He's just been an icon in Silicon Valley. And with that said, Jonathan, welcome to Intersections.
Hey, Brian, thanks for the kind introduction. I guess I'm at the intersection of John and Brian today, which is a distinct honor for me. I appreciate that.
A sandwich. You're the sandwich.
First time I've heard that one. That's good. That's good. Hey, well, there's so many places that I just want to start. But, we haven't seen each other in a while. And certainly, being with the San Jose Sharks during a pandemic is probably going to not going to be an experience you forget anytime soon. And I guess the good news is that you just welcomed fans in for the first time, and that is fantastic. So before we kick things off, Jonathan, maybe share with us your role with the Sharks and maybe how that came to be, and then we'll dive into some questions.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm, as you said, president of Sharks Sports and Entertainment, which is the parent organization for the NHL San Jose Sharks, the AHL, which most people will think of as the minor league team, San Jose Barracuda. We have 3 ice facilities in Northern California beyond the main building, the SAP Center that many of you have been in, one in Oakland, one in Fremont, one in San Jose. We're in growth mode, so more ice as well. We've got a nonprofit foundation. We did a little tech investing as well. So it's a fun environment to be in. And, for a guy that spent his whole life in technology, 3 startups and 1 mega-sized company, it seems like an unlikely destination. And I do not want to pretend that I was a 5-year-old kid telling my mom I was going to run a professional sports franchise one day. I didn't say I was going to do that, nor did I say I was going to be an astronaut. But it turns out it's not surprising, which is I've always been an experience-focused technology exec. And I'll tell you why I no longer like the word customer experience, maybe later in the show. But I've always been an experience-based technology exec. And what different than a real experience of, I think I'm in the business of experience now, of making memories, of thinking about what it means for every facet in a game day of what that experience looks like. So in some sense, this is the culmination of my career. I just didn't, well, hopefully not the culmination. This is a natural evolution of my career. I just didn't realize it at the time.
It's certainly an exciting one, and being a hockey fan, the San Jose Sharks are just a legendary team, and so you're part of a legendary franchise. I do actually want to take a detour because, as you know, I wrote a book on experience, and a big believer in experience design, especially one that is tech-driven, but not tech-only, one that brings to life new types of experiences in the real world that we might not have otherwise imagined, almost Imagineering in a sense. So do explain your thoughts on customer experience and what we could learn from you being literally in the experience business.
Yeah, and I will say the pandemic drove this home. I think the ideas were floating around in my head before this happened, but having no live events and no transactions for 14 plus months is what highlighted this. The problem I have with the way most people talk about customer experience, whether they're thinking about journey maps, which is now dated, whether they say things like the funnel isn't linear, the emphasis is on the word customer. And therefore they're saying, how do I get to a transaction? And even when they say, well, experience post-transaction, there's still the word transaction in it, which means the mental model is always about how do I make money off of this entity, this person, this whatever. And when you're in a pandemic and you have in the business of live events, there's not really many ways to make money. I'm not actually taking tickets to a building. So it forced me to think about experience in a non-transactional way. And the more I thought about experience in a non-transactional way, and you can argue the word fan versus customer. I'm not here to get a vocabulary debate going, although I would love some input from you one day, Brian, about what the right word is I recognize that there are other people that contribute to my customer's experience, the food and beverage merchandiser, the merchandise as well, the TV broadcasting, the streaming, all those which are not in my control. If you're a tech back person, that's kind of like the SI as part of the experience as well. And if you're constantly trying to figure out, well, what's the ROI of this, or how do I make money of it, that leaks through to the customer and they recognize that they're a transaction. So now what we're trying to do is step back and say, what are the touch points that us and our agents involve in our entire network, and how do we make those touch points better? And so right now, internally, I'm talking about touch point experience. I don't think that that feels a little too touchy-feely. That's probably the wrong phrase, but that's where we're headed. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I could, I know this is a detour, but I could talk to you about this all day. You know, I was talking the other day in a presentation and the word touch point came up, and it did strike me that because the word touch is in touch point, it's easy for anyone working in customer experience or service or just business in general to forget about something so personal. Like a touch to me is, it says, you know, Jonathan, I have your attention for a minute. We're here together. You know, what do you want to do together? And how can I make this moment something that you'll appreciate, enjoy, remember? Because when you approach it from that human standpoint, all of the things that you mentioned become sort of enablers for that moment. And if we could design those moments, you know, again, whether it's a fan or for a customer or for a guest, it really is just another human being. And I think in all of the last few decades of business evolution and technology acceleration, I think we got into scale and efficiency and transactions more than we got into the sort of that relationship design. And I think in a time where a pandemic has sort of reminded us that we are human, I guess is one way to put it.
Exactly.
You know, maybe we have an opportunity here to reimagine what those experiences could look like. And the question I'd like to pose to you is, you literally have an opportunity right now, Jonathan, to rebuild that person by person. You just opened up, but to how many guests was that?
So typically we had on Monday, we had 500 guests in a venue that seats 18,000. So clearly that's not very many. Last night we had 1,000, and by next Monday we should have about 1,500. So still well below maximum capacity.
Well below maximum capacity, and also you've had time and also still have time to reimagine then what those experiences could be like, and reimagine what it's like to be in an arena. And at the same time, you have players who, you know, I don't know about you. Last time I was in the professional hockey team, I used to vibe off of the electricity from the audience. And so, how have they been in terms of their playing? You know, I'm sure you're talking to them back, you know, in the locker room. Have they expressed, you know, sort of that missing the humanity, the electricity?
For sure. I mean, no matter how much we tried to play with fake crowd sound, and we did lots of interesting experiments, and I think we did a decent job. The players recognize the difference between canned sound. Maybe it's harder to tell on TV or on streaming, but it's much easier in person. And it's probably no surprise that we're on a 2-game win streak for the 2 games where authentic fans are back in. It's a momentum changing thing. When you get, and think about it all for personal psychology, when you get stuck in anything, how do you get yourself back out of it? One of the ways you get yourself back out of it is you look for something to interrupt your flow. And the easiest thing to interrupt your flow is usually not internal, and it's external cue. And the fans become that external cue that can literally change the psychology of a player in a sport, or any of us as athletes in the professions we do. But Brian, if you don't mind me taking the cue of where you went, if by reimagining, which I think is a fantastic word. In fact, one of our strategic objectives for this year is to reimagine every experience from the ground up. That's literally part of our corporate scorecard. And as a simple example, if you think about a traditional big event you've been in, where are the congregation points? Where are the places that the fans and the guests line up? Well, one of them is always food and beverage. You're in that line to order your food and beverage, and then in another line to pick it up. So can we eliminate the line to order food and beverage by changing the nature of the app and making it more traditional commerce oriented so people can order ahead? But order ahead might mean order from your couch before you even drive into the arena, because maybe particularly if you're that I tend to eat at first intermission, or I like to eat before the game, or right, I'm going to want to drink at every period, or whatever it is your habit. And frankly, if we use machine learning techniques, we can even recommend to you, not yet because we don't have enough data yet, but as we capture that data, and frankly, then give discounts as well. Now, here's an interesting challenge for you, and then I'll pause, which is all that works really well if you're a debit card, credit card style customer. But a big part of who we are, because we're in Silicon Valley, is very DE&I focused, very make sure that we don't price this out of only for the elite. Our entry level tickets are $10. So this is not intended to be one of those premium experiences. And not everybody has a credit or a debit card. So one of the innovations that get to technology and sports that happened is we created a reverse ATM. Reverse ATM is exactly what it's like. If you have cash, you put your cash into the ATM machine and a debit card comes out that's Shark branded. That debit card not only works in our arena, but works anywhere that a debit card is accepted. But now we're literally with you as part of our brand. That way we enable the unbanked or the non-debit cards to be part of the experience as well. So that's a unexpected benefit that we started with a health and safety concern. How do we stop lines that drove an innovation? And ultimately, to be fair, we'll get new data as well about purchasing behavior, but that's not why we did it. But that drives a whole new business for us over time.
That is very cool. I had no idea. I love that. I love that. And John, I want to make sure that you get some questions in here too. So Jonathan, if it's okay, I'm going to throw it over to John, and then I will circle back. But I got to tell you, that's impressive. And before I do turn it over to you, John, Jonathan, I do want to invite myself to the arena now that it's opening back up.
Please do. Send me a note, Brian. You
come and hang out with you in the real world. All right, John, over to you.
Well, I've been listening with great fascination. You know, I think the touchy-feely part, which we alluded to earlier, is actually pretty fundamental to all of this. And listening to two experts in the, we won't call it experience design area, talk about experience design, makes me realize that a piece of conceptual framing that Abraham Maslow shared with us a long time ago about a hierarchy of needs is so necessary in terms of being clear about what kinds of experiences we're talking about. You know, what I'm really curious about, Jonathan, is how you are able to create almost that high level, overarching relationship experience of that feeling of connection, that feeling of my life is enhanced because I have a relationship with the Sharks, with the brand, with the overall experience, as distinguished from the tactical experiences of, you know, giving you a reason to remember that you're thirsty and you want to have a drink. So related to that, I'm sorry, this is a long setup, but
okay, John, ask me the question. Not a problem.
Yeah, I've been aware of the fact that there's a lot of experimentation going on in venues with regard to personalization of the experience. And, you know, as we get into the notion of personal digital identity, so, and machine learning, obviously, so that we can do pattern recognition. And it's not just drinks, but it's like how you would relate to merch, for instance. And most importantly, how you would make the bridge between the venue experience and everything that happens outside the venue, because you don't want the relationship to just be about the, you know, 3 or 4 hours that you're at the venue. You want it to be 300, you know, 7 by 24, 365. Yep. So, what's top of mind for you when I kind of, you know, talk in this way about what the potential is?
John, there are at least a half a dozen really deep and meaty questions in there that we could talk about for a while. So let me go quickly, and if something catches your interest, ask me to follow up on that.
Sure.
So first is, we think of ourselves as a community as opposed to a brand and as opposed to an organization. Now, what do I mean by that? Right before I got here, the brand expression was Sharks for Life. And part of that was we actually partnered with health companies. And when babies were born, we gave out free Sharks jumpers and things like that. So you could actually swaddle your baby with Sharks logos, with fans want to do that as well. And, and then there were skating lessons for free up to a certain age. And the idea that this is a family thing that grows, I'm not going to ask a 3-year-old to buy season tickets. That's a ridiculous jump. That's like asking for revenue too quick in a traditional tech funnel. But if I think of this as a lifetime cradle to grave, sorry, we shouldn't probably say it that way in this world, then it's a very different mental model because it doesn't become tickets first. And it worked fantastically for about a decade. But I actually discovered, and I shouldn't say our team discovered, a limitation for the Sharks for Life ethos that we're putting out, which is some people said, I don't want to have this lifelong thing. I do want a causal relation with you. I can be a fan sometimes. I may move out of the area. I may come back. And so 2.5, 3 years ago, we actually pivoted to teal together as our primary ethos. And teal is our color. It's our primary color. We're one of the few teams in professional sports to not use red or blue or gold, some of the more common colors. So we said, bringing people together into one thing is going to how we rally. And how does that work? If there are 18,000 people in a sold-out arena, not this year, obviously, but in a more typical year, there are about 5,000 to 10,000 more people than that are watching that game, either on social or stream. There are another 5,000 to 10,000 that are interested in what happens in the game, but they not be able to watch it. For example, we have a premier athlete called Evander Kane. EK9, his nickname is. He's from Vancouver. If he's having a spectacular game, then fans from Vancouver will chime in at 5 or 10x the normal rate because he's from Vancouver and he's a local legend there. Whereas on another game, we'll get almost nobody tuning in from Vancouver. And understanding that dynamics and programming that's something that's important to us. And so back to your original question, we start by saying we're in the business of making experiences wherever you are. That doesn't mean you should be limited to being in the building. And so by recognizing that and so many of our players are international. They're from Sweden or Switzerland. We now have a player from Germany, et cetera. So those people are probably never going to come to our arena or once in a lifetime. And so if turnstile sales is your definition of success, which it typically is in every business, then we've missed the boat. So we created something called the 1991 Club, which is explicitly for people that are out of market. And we match them up so that they can have joint viewing parties, but they're having them digitally as opposed to, because they can't subscribe to Comcast or NBC or whatever your local thing is. And so that's why I'm heartened to see the rise of new technology, like a company that we partner with, Buzzer, that allows you to do live look-ins of only like 10 seconds or a couple of minutes for maybe 99 cents. And then if you like what you want, then you can buy the entire game or buy the entire network, et cetera. So short answer to a complicated question, John. I'm not sure if I touched on everything you asked.
That's my specialty. So on the reverse ATM, I'm just curious. So is this like a stored value card? You put money in, you get the card, then you can use it like a limited access Visa card, but also it's branded. Am I getting that correct?
Correct. The only thing that I would encourage you to say is the reason I wouldn't consider it Visa is not because we don't love the fact they're based here in Northern California. Visa implies that there's some kind of fee. There's no fee to the consumer at all for this card. Right. You put $50 on it, it's got $50. So it's more like a gift card, if you will.
Right.
Yeah. And that works anywhere you want. That's a gift card. You could even use it online if you wanted to.
And where do you actually do that transaction? Is it in the venue where you have?
Right now it's in the venue. So we have one at each major entrance and you show up with your cash. But there's nothing that's not limiting us from when ATMs grow to put them in other places that we know Sharks fans gather. So if there are viewing parties, for example, we've done them with the Earthquakes in the Earthquake Stadium. We've done them up in San Francisco with the Giants. I mean, we could put these things, particularly as the cost of technology narrows them down. The biggest issue for not growing them is a machine that you put money into is one that people want to break into. So we got to figure out how to deploy that in a safe way.
It's a really interesting way of looking at micropayments. And I'm sure you've thought about the implications for couponing and CSR programs and, other kinds of initiatives that are more in the do-good arena.
Well, so
but
that part of the community is a huge part of who we are. You may or may not know, we have a large foundation that gives back primarily to the South Bay, less in the North Bay. We do learn to read programs, learn math programs, many of which have professional hockey players showing up, because we try to make it fun by explaining fractions, right? 1 period out of 3 is a 1/3. It might be harder for someone to understand the abstract 1/3 concept if you're early, but you do get that you've gone 1 period out of the 3 in hockey. We do, fitness programs and go into schools and give them new blacktops. We actually call them teal tops because we put teal in them as part of our brand as well.
Right.
But it's the same idea. So to your point, do you remember, I'm going to guess based on what you said on pre-show, you probably do. You remember coupon books, the literally ones that you used to get?
Yeah.
So part of what we're considering is a digital coupon book based on this idea as well.
Well, and you could basically have CSR contribute. You put in your $50, you get the card, but you get a $25 coupon towards a high school entrepreneurship online course on your mobile phone, right? And there's a do good, there's a brand value for whoever is the sponsor, and then your card becomes even more indispensable.
At the B2B level, that's one of the things we already do. Virtually every one of our company sponsors has a do good component, as you called it, a community benefit. That's a requirement that we typically have. There are a few exceptions, but I think we're at like 98% or some large number like that. Extending it so that the consumer part of our business does it as well is a fantastic idea and a place we want to go.
So interesting. I mean, I think the notion of sports franchises as distribution channels for doing good and for kind of empowering people from this microeconomic point of view, and also then inspiring them with the magic of sports. And obviously there are other kinds of venue-based live activities, music being another, and cultural events and so on. It's
well, John, can you draw 10,000 people? Because we have about 100 concerts a year. I understand you're an accomplished musician, so should we have you on stage?
Rumor has it. Well, I'm open to suggestions. I'm really enthralled by your experience, and I can see why the bridge between your SAP experience and the venue experience is such a robust connection. So
let me give you.
I think.
I was going to say, I'm going to give you a simple idea to keep in your head, which is, I spent a lot of time in technology, 3 technology startups. As I said, SAP was a CMO, and tech companies are always talking about turning customers into fans. In some sense, I've got the reverse problem. How do I turn fans into customers? Although I don't want to lead with a transaction. And the eye-opening part for me is I've never been to a tech company where literally people brand the logo on their arm. And we have thousands of fans that have actually put our logo. In fact, one of the things we did is we offered free Sharks logos for fans that want to do it. The first 500 during playoffs, and I think 1,800 showed up to get the 500 free logos. So that kind of passion and identification is powerful, but we can use it for good. We can use it for social justice purpose, for micropayments, for wealth enhancement as well, not just for generating revenue. And that's the balance we try to do.
It's fantastic, and it speaks to the power of purpose, which clearly you've got woven into everything you do. So look forward to learning more. It's an amazing set of accomplishments, and I get the sense that you got a long way to go with this. So back over to you, Brian, to kind of round this out. But Jonathan, great to meet you.
Yeah, Jonathan, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. And we're going to have to continue that conversation about experience architecture and design. I've been exploring some crazy concepts around what could we learn about experience design in the real world and online if it were the metaverse.
Yep.
And just going crazy. And I know someone like you would appreciate a conversation like that. So maybe we could do it in the real world over a glass of wine.
Would love to. And maybe I'll even get you to tweet "Customer experience is dead. Long live touch point experience."
Hey,
all right.
Sounds like another book.
I'll do that as John's introducing our next guest. And hopefully I'll remember it. But Jonathan, thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you again, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, I forgot to tell Jonathan. Good luck against the Avalanche in their series. So if he's still backstage, maybe he'll hear that.
I think hockey has better team names than other genres of sports. I mean, Sharks versus Avalanche. Come on.
Sounds like a movie.
Yeah, exactly.
What was that? Sharknado, I think was one of my favorite films series in a long time. Not really, but I just love the audacity of someone who brought that idea to a studio and said, "Let me tell you about this idea for a movie that I have: sharks and tornadoes," and then boom. Now you've got a franchise. But on that note, John, our next guest is backstage, and I want to make sure that we get her on as soon as possible.
Absolutely. We've got a quality and quantity block of time. So let me quickly introduce Debra Farber. Debra is one of these multifaceted people who's made the topic of privacy into essentially if I read the tea leaves right, a personal cottage industry. She's a domain expert. She serves on various NGO institutions. She's an advisor to major corporations. She is a person who continuously develops new ideas in the privacy area, and also has, from the looks of it, a very robust life as a early stage investor in companies that touch on the privacy area. So again, one of a kind of intersections a compliant guest who does not fit the traditional container of a job or a linear career in an organization. So Debra, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. And I mean, it's great to be, introduced right after a Sharknado reference.
Well, there you go. We took great care in terms of juxtaposing the two guests today. So you're in good company.
And there had to be a way to go from the sharks to talk about privacy. Indeed.
Well, I think there is, I mean, obviously I'd love to get the, the wide angle perspective on what you're working on and what's, kind of hot spots in your landscape on privacy. But there is a very specific thing that we could segue into from the discussion of venue, which is, obviously a lot of these franchises, and whether it's a music venue that's collecting data on people because they want to turn them into 365-day-a-year fans, or what Jonathan talked about in terms of building the Sharks brand, depends materially on people sharing their data. And, if you get this stored value card, this affinity card, you're sharing data. And,
sure.
People these days don't necessarily or usually have a sense of the implications of when they transact in terms of the data they're giving up. But you can easily see that the kind of methodology that Jonathan was talking about is going to spread like wildfire. And people, so it's part of this general move of not only people giving up data, but needing to be more aware of what they are in fact giving up. So I think we have you on Twitter.
On Twitter here, yeah.
Unbelievable. All singing, all dancing here at Intersections.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about this? Generally speaking, about this move towards sharing data. The notion of brands, encouraging that. Where are we going to stand on in terms of this overall privacy issue, and what do people really have to know?
Sure. And so specifically, I have to admit, I missed the first half of the conversation. So if you could just give me like a quick overview.
Oh, yeah, sure. So they have a venue, and the venue is starting to experiment, and venues in general, let me be more generic, are starting to experiment with, you're a fan or a customer, or whatever paradigm word we want to use. We learn about you so that we can predict what you might be interested in, whether it's refreshments or merch. But we want to transcend the narrow realm of transactions and get you really to be in a relationship with us and with our sense of purpose and societal, commitments to purposeful social change, which, in fact, these are great vehicles for doing that. And so there have been experiments with people walking in and having their data or certain amounts of data be able to be read. The sharks themselves have a stored value card where you put money into a machine, you get a card out, you can use it for all debit card transactions, but it is a branded card that ultimately can carry social benefits and things of this kind. So we're sharing our data in all kinds of ways that we never expected to. And what's your sense of, where do we all stand on in terms of managing around these issues of privacy, and what do you see as being the hot issues these days?
These are great questions, and I feel like I could talk about this all day. So first, I think sharing data with different organizations is great, as long as it's done in a privacy protective way. There's transparency about how your data is being used. There are, the people designing the systems are looking at not only, can we protect this from breach, but are also, from a privacy perspective, privacy is separate from security, right? Where in information security, we typically look at the triad of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And all of information security is kind of built around protecting for those three things. With privacy, you see an overlap with confidentiality. And that's where we see when there's breaches, and if there's a breach of a system, you also get a breach of that data, which affects the individual. And we hear about those all the time. But there's plenty of other privacy harms and potential violations that companies need to risk model for, threat model for, much like they do for security today, and many are not, right? And so those examples include like surveillance, right? I mean, that's not a matter of breach, it's a matter of you changing your behavior because you believe you're being watched, and therefore you don't have that sense of I can freely move within my whatever sphere it is of that you're within. And so there's plenty of, just want to expand our thinking beyond just the confidentiality security aspect of privacy. So what I'm seeing is huge changes in different areas, and my cat is just meowing in the background. He does this before he takes a poo. I'm so sorry. I can't stop.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right.
What was I going to say? So certain areas are really ripe for disruption right now. We're seeing it in ad tech, where consumers just didn't want to be tracked as much anymore. And we have a lot of regulation, yes, GDPR, CCPA in California. We've got a lot of regulatory drivers, but it's not fines that are getting your everyday, your mom and pop shop to change their ways, right? They're kind of dependent on an advertising system that's been put in place since the beginning of the World Wide Web and its explosion. So as a result, you're starting to see now, not just you've heard the call for, we need privacy engineering, we need privacy engineers, and a lot of Google's hired and made 100 privacy engineers and trained them, and is doing a really great job at training engineers on the important pressing privacy aspects of today. And you're finding a lot of them then leave and say, hey, I'm going to be entrepreneurial. I see this privacy space is really hot, kind of like security was 15 years ago. I mean, you're going to see as many privacy tech startups as you see security startups. It's just the real beginning, because they're starting to realize you got to architect for and build for into, and whether it's through software or creating privacy preserving API layers, or using architecture like distributed ledger systems like blockchain or Hashgraph, or so there's different ways of approaching this. And what I'm seeing is a lot of money. Actually, I'm watching a lot of the deal flow through my work with the rise of privacy tech, and I'm seeing just a really hot topic right now is privacy tech companies, because there's this opportunity to build in that architecture that is going to be privacy preserving from the beginning. Whether you're really dealing with the how data is governed at the data level and then extrapolating and building out, or whether you're using new tools that you're bringing to market, like homomorphic encryption, which allows you to query data sets that are encrypted, but still get real good insights out of it, which previously was you're only really able to do in the lab. But now there's companies coming to the forefront that are allowing any size company to basically use their service to conduct these queries. So I'm starting to see a lot more in the search space, companies like Neva, which are ex-Google folks, I believe, that have gotten millions and millions in funding to do an ad-free search engine, which just kind of has so much more space available now and makes it a cleaner experience. Where the real innovation here, I don't want to say innovation, but the real business model change is putting the consumer, for lack of a better word here, at the center of what you're building for, as opposed to really putting the advertisers and the publishers and building your solution around them and making the person the product, right? And so I'm seeing a lot of that uptake of, there's been years of this personal data ecosystem that many have wanted to build, where we're empowering the user to take a cut of the data that we're using to advertise about them, or go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So right now, I would wager that most people are not aware of the privacy dynamics that surround their digital representation. And Chris Young, who made a comment in the crawl, said the same thing, that we don't necessarily know that we're being surveilled or that our data is being used. And, we all, I do this, I confess, when I get all of those kind of disclaimer scrolling by, I just say accept. I don't read them, even though that's supposed to be protecting me. And, the mechanisms in place seem fairly bureaucratic. So if we fast forward, let's say we fast forward 7 years from now, which is far enough in the future to see a whole new wave of innovation be implemented, but not so far away that we're in the science fiction era.
Right.
What do you see as being the ordinary citizen's experience of privacy at that point? Because we're not going to still be looking at forms and clicking "I agree" and so forth and so on. It's got to be more seamless, but also presumably more effective. But what is it? What if you cast your imagination into the future for a sec? What do you think it's going to look like?
That's a great question. I think we're going to see a lot. So I totally agree that the consent-based, the notices and we need the consent, but we need something that's got less friction. And so again, I think if we build, I think in the future, we're going to see companies like what Salesforce did, or what AWS did with security, right? They built their entire, it was a security by design mindset in building Salesforce. It was a security by design mindset in building AWS. These are just two giant, tech companies in that ecosystem. But that was really part of the innovation for CRM in Salesforce's case. But what I predict is we're going to see a lot more data intensive, data processing heavy companies of all sizes, really building with architecture in mind that's going to facilitate the, let's take the word privacy out of it and just think more ethics and what the user, an individual wants. We're gonna see a lot more transparency about what it is we're going to be doing with the data. That's going to be embedded more into the UX and that flow of maybe onboarding a new customer to whether you're talking about a general consumer site or a B2B customer. I think that the transparency and accountability piece is key, and it's all tied in with data governance, right? So because as you govern privacy, you need to understand what data you have across your ecosystem as a business, right? And so for that reason, the focus on understanding where the personal data lies will then enable you to have more security around that data, more privacy, more controls around how that data is used, where you can then show assurances like, hey, look, when if we're using, asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance or whatever, like a Hedera hash graph and using them as a distributed ledger, you'd be able to, have a certain set of attestation that you can prove to a customer, to an individual, to a regulator, that the system is acting as intended, right? And so
are you saying that basically our experience will still be fairly, how to put it, we'll still be fairly unconscious of what's going on, but we will have to trust that there are wise companies and regulatory agencies working backstage to assure ethical behavior? I mean, in other words, we're still going to be in that same kind of, we're just going about our business, assuming that everything is going to be fine? Or is there a way that we can be...
Go ahead.
Or is there a way that we can be more activist, each one of us as citizens?
So that's a great point. And I'd love to create more privacy and security champions here in this podcast. I do think that what I've noticed, because I've been doing this 16 years, and there's a certain point in time I'm like, you know what, trying to push the privacy agenda feels Sisyphusian. I feel, within a company trying to make that change, outside that company trying to make that change has been really, really tough. And I think what I'm seeing is that there is a groundswell, there is a tipping point now where consumer demand for privacy cannot be ignored by big businesses. And so what I think it is going to feel like a few more years, in my opinion, where it's still like consumers are confused. But then you're going to see some breakout companies. I mean, Apple's doing this right now too, where they've earned enough trust by being transparent that even if there's a little snafu, they rebound quickly and can still regain that trust. And so, and privacy is a real big, ethical win for companies. Cisco has done study after study that demonstrates that investments in privacy end up building, shortening your sales cycles, getting out, enables better products, more trust from consumers. There's actual value there in the dollars. And so companies want to use privacy as a win. And as a result, they're thinking like, what do we need to do to demonstrate that we are, using personal data in an ethical way that is known by people. Right. And a lot of this has to do, a lot of the new conversation around privacy has to do with the fact that there are new rights that individuals have to exercise both in the EU and the US. And so these are rights that as consumers, you should all know. Well, I mean, right now in California, you've got these rights and a few other states are following suit. It's not federal yet, but you should check to see what your state allows. And you have a right to ask most companies, like what data do you process about me? How long do you keep it? Where I want it deleted. You don't always have a right to have it deleted, but you have a right to ask. There are rights that you have under the California Consumer Privacy Protection Act, but I don't live in California anymore. So even though I have had some really major, challenges with companies like Clubhouse that didn't think about privacy by design, they didn't think about a lot of things before they put their app into a global regulatory ecosystems, right, without thought. So that could be a whole other topic. I'm concerned about how they're using my data that I gave them because I signed up, but there's other people who never signed up for Clubhouse, but they are still collecting data about people who didn't sign up through contact books, on your phone contacts.
Right.
So there's a lot of suspicion. And I mean, what I've been trying to do is elevate this discussion on social media, right? Because I'm even trying to get other privacy and security folks to walk the walk and talk the talk. How many security folks or privacy folks do you see on Clubhouse that are talking about privacy and security and how, on an insecure and unsafe app? A lot. And instead of, so I quick out of the gate was trying to protect and get people to raise the alarms that we should be asking for more minimal viable privacy, right? As part of a minimal viable product, you need to add in the basics of having a product in today's ecosystem, which includes privacy.
You're going to be able to write a book on the ironies of privacy in our 7-year forward scenario, because it seems like there are many of them. Mindful of the time, I want to make sure that my partner Brian gets in here. So Brian, how about if I throw it over to you?
Oh, thank you. Well, Debra, I had a question for the cat, actually. So.
Oh yes, Catman do.
This conversation is just so fascinating. I'm geeking out here as both someone from thinking from UX UI, but also thinking as a consumer. I'm sure, Debra, you've heard the technical term creepy line in privacy discussions. It seems to be universal these days. But I'm always fascinated by how much a customer is willing to share with a company or an employee with their employer in exchange for something of value. So, for example, at Salesforce, we had some research published recently that showed that employees were willing to share all kinds of data with their employer if it meant that they would be safe at work. And at the same time, in other reports, we've seen customers willing to share all kinds of really fascinating data in order to get a better experience. But when you look at it from the company's perspective and whatever their data policy is or whatever their data policy is as it is evolving in this new world, they don't necessarily put the customer at the center of not only the design, but the customer at the center, or the person at the center of the experience. So as John said earlier, this is a long run up here to the question, but I wanted to frame this because let's talk about consent. I mean, legally, many companies have to ask you, is it okay if I get cookies, if I, or whatever it is? But they're not using that as an opportunity to help people understand what's being tracked and what value they can get from that. And I was wondering why that is. Why aren't companies thinking about using this as an opportunity to rethink the social contract between them, to make that process transparent? Like, here's what we collect and what we'd like to do with it. What do you think? Rather than just making it so technical and not human-centered, and what do we need to do to change that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot at play here. I think, for one, the privacy policies have been written to comply with the law, and how they define, like, what's a cookie, what's a beacon, where do you put, how in the privacy policies, I think we could all agree aren't very helpful. It's people read them and they don't get a lot of insight out of what they're saying. And I would say that the EU laws and California consumer, the CCPA, is they do require more detail. But in the past, it hasn't, like, who specifically are you sharing my data with, right? It needs to be actually spelled out, like, what cookies you're using. For EU, you need to say what cookies you're using. So if that's a really long list, that doesn't look so great, but it's legally required. But we don't see as much of that in the US. I would say that, the ad tech company ad tech industry for all its time in existence has been saying we could self-regulate. We don't want regulation, right? We got this. It's a complicated area, so we got this. We'll self-regulate. We'll create some, like, standards that everybody needs to follow. And time again, they just haven't been enough or keeping up with what the global laws require. So even now, there's this whole, like, does the ad industry even meet CCPA requirements? CCPA requires that you actually, say what data you are sharing with third parties and are selling to third parties. And the question is advertising considered a sale of your data if you're getting advertising revenue from that? And so, I mean, they don't want a lot of transparency. I mean, I think they would argue that they do, but there's obviously that keeping it obfuscated and how the ad industry works is kind of by design, because there's no need to even have online behavioral advertising and even know down to, like, the level of granularity that would do a person's behavior on the web. Yeah, and then there's a lot of studies that show that just targeted ads are actually more effective. So, it's interesting that right now, like, what you're saying is that we need to put the users at the center of the conversation. And that's exactly what these new companies that are coming out onto the scene are trying to do. They're going, Google, you're taking Debra Farber's, like, behavioral, experience, and however you're fingerprinting that or creating a profile or whatnot. I'm not going into specifics. And then you're selling it many, many, many times and reaping the rewards many times. It feels exploitative, right? It's not even just privacy. It just feels like exploitative. And I would like, if you're going to use my data and you say it has value, then give that value back to me. And that's what companies are doing now, is creating the, everything from the creator economy. And now it's like, let's compensate creators. It's very similar in, like, well, if you're going to be giving, your advertising data up, you could select what companies can advertise to you in some of these. There's many out there. If I start naming them, I'll just get stuck in trying to think of all of them. But
Right.
they're just, I think we're going to be really excited by the new ecosystem that is starting to disintermediate the old one, where we're putting the consumer at the center. It's more democratic principles and feeling, right? Where the whole trends I'm seeing are decentralized power, right? Let's start doing, decentralized finance. Let's start doing, we're seeing people take back the power in the way that we're crafting new companies that are giving power back to the powerless. And that's where I'm seeing the trends go. I mean, and you're seeing a lot of that coming from, supported by NGOs. It really is a global coming together, but I'm seeing it happening in different pockets and different ecosystems. Like, I had no idea ad tech would be just this ripe for disruption this quickly, like just getting rid of third-party cookies like Google is doing, or the privacy notices that iOS is requiring, is really shifting the entire ad tech industry.
Right.
Publishers are trying to figure out how they could, continue to market when they only have access to first-party cookies.
I got to ask you a question about that, because it's one that's coming up more and more, as the death of the cookie. And I'd love for those who are in marketing, but also those who are in customer experience, what does the death of the cookie mean to them? And I should also note that I'm also on Facebook here, and I just started getting advertisements for kitty litter. I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean,
but that wouldn't be.
My Kathmandu, so.
But what does the death of the cookie mean? And oh my goodness, we're almost out of time. So Debra, as I guess within a few minutes.
I think it means a new beginning. I think it means it gives us an opportunity to start over again in the industry. It's not necessarily bad. It's just disruptive. So you've got to kind of figure out what you're going to do. Find a company like Blot Out. I'm an investor there, so I have to put it out. A company like the ones that are working on creating a first-party data lakes and doing more client-side processing of that data, so they never have access to it. This is what I mean about architecting for privacy, right? So there are companies out there that can, what Google was doing, they can create that for you within your, create a data lake for you, so that you can start, using your first-party cookies to market. And still capture the same level of insights, if not even better, because they aren't based on an ecosystem that has a lot of ad fraud in it. There's so much money thrown into the old way of doing ad tech, and there's not really a lot of fidelity in whether or not you're getting the payouts are appropriate or not, right? So the new way means less ad fraud, more connectivity directly to your customers. It's first-party cookies. So the death of the third-party cookie to me means more privacy and more trust in the ecosystem for consumers. I actually think it's a good thing, but small companies and publishers everywhere are going to be freaking out for a little bit. I don't think you need to freak out. You just need to do a little research on how you might need to, change your business. But it shouldn't be cost prohibitive for you, and it should be like the death card in tarot, right? It doesn't mean you're going to die. It means a new beginning, right? Like shedding the old ways and starting with something that's going to set us up for success and be more self-sovereign, right?
Yeah, and I think as Chris Jung just shared with us, that it's about turning these into opportunities for interactions with customers and putting them at the center of their experiences, and at some point giving them more control of the experiences they want to have. And I think that's a message of empowerment, really, not one of fear. In that, the more we can improve relationships with people, the more that we can give value and get value. And that's the definition of a relationship, one in which both or all parties receive some type of mutual benefit or values. And so, Debra, with that said, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I look forward to continuing conversations about privacy on Clubhouse, and we'll see you soon, Debra. I'll see you on Twitter as well. Thank you for all of the awesome sound bites that I was able to tweet as you were speaking. We'll look forward to following your new chapter.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure
Debra.
to be here. Bye.
Bye, Debra.
Good luck.
Well, John,
Wow.
another week, another amazing series of conversations. I'm now thinking about hockey. I'm thinking about reverse ATMs. I'm thinking about real life experiences, one that in a stadium brings to life a sense of personalization before, during, and after an event. I'm now thinking about privacy in new ways, thinking about shifting from opting out or in to transactions, to interactions, and essentially relationship building. I don't even know where to start and how we could summarize this other than just wow. And I'm looking forward to some announcements that we'll be making here. Mr. Kao, if I'm not mistaken, in a couple of weeks, we'll officially be updating intersectionslive.com. We'll be kicking off our newsletter, and we might even start the work on reverse engineering these episodes into podcasts. So, woo, exciting.
It's a big archive we've got, and it's evergreen material. So we're going to have a good time going through it and making it, bringing it up to the present, from where we started, which was last August. So that's very exciting. We're going to be curators, Brian.
Yeah, we're going to be curators. Indeed. Well, always a pleasure to see you, John. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Right. We love and appreciate your support. We love your engagement. We love your thoughts, your ideas. You help steer these conversations in ways that are far more collaborative and productive than we could do just by ourselves. We look forward to seeing you next Thursday and every Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific. Do go to intersectionslive.com. Where we have an archive of all of the episodes to date. We might be a little bit behind, but everything gets there eventually. And do reach out to us in the meantime. Share your suggestions for guests. Share your ideas for the show. We are going to be introducing some interesting updates to the format, too, to make it much more lively and exciting.
Surprises to come.
Surprises to come, indeed. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. Thank you.